Aloha and welcome back to another episode of the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. The podcast where two dudes plus some tag-alongs cover everything green and gold. I'm Mike and got Iowa Joe over there. And Joe, it's great to be back. Hope you've not missed me too much. Probably not at all, but glad to be back. How you doing, buddy?
Well, I thought I was going to have to send out search parties and everything else with as long as it took for you to get back. So, I mean, at least
Either
you're
that or
here.
you're going to
So.
change it back to Outback because Nick is freeing up.
So, it's good to have you back. I mean, we had some solid guests on that kind of kept me company for the most part, but it never is the same without your partners. So, you know, I tried to hold it down anyway.
No, you did great. But today we're doing D tackles. This is the final position group of our preview of the 2024 draft class.
Now, I want to say, I know there are other positions available, but you can blame me. I miscounted, I misscheduled everything. That we're not going to get to some of them. Like, obviously, we're not going to get to special teams because special teams really whatever. But there's also the quarterback position. We didn't get to the quarterback position. And I think that's about it. We had to mix the wide receivers and the tight ends together, but it is what it is. So bite me.
And honestly, we're just all glad that we don't have to do a deep dive into this quarterback class. So
Right.
That's just honestly a sign of
Although
how well Jordan Love played. So we're
although I
taking
do think that they'll take a flyer on somebody late just to add that
I can
extra
see
arm
them
or whatever.
depending on who's kind of down, in that fifth and later round kind of area. They might definitely take a flyer on someone. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, so but that's for another day. Like Mike said, this is for defensive tackles. So let's
Yep.
kind of get into it.
Yep. So just to recap where the Packers room is at, the Packers seem to kind of, I don't want to say they solved the room, but based on guys on the roster stepping up, namely TJ Slayton stepping his game up, Kenny Clark being as reliable as ever, and some flashes from Carl Brooks, who was a rookie last year, and Devontae Wyatt living up at least to his pass rushing chops. Need to see more from him as a run defender, but you've got four guys who are contributing, decently well to pretty well at times during the season. And then you did have Colby Wooden stepping in for important snaps here and there. So, that's a solid five on the roster so far, but it would probably be good for the team to add another player through the draft who can push for more interior snaps. It remains to be seen what the team is going to want to do with Colby Wooden this year. Kind of think that he may be utilized in that Cullen Jenkins role, where he would play on the edge on run downs and then move inside on passing downs. Obviously, Wooden hasn't established himself as the defender that Jenkins was back in the day, but it'll be interesting to see his usage just because of what he came in as his measurements. He was under 280 when he came to Green Bay. He's still only listed at 273 on the roster, and we'll kind of see where that goes as training camp comes along. But yeah, the room has taken further shape, but it's not necessarily set in stone. So it'll be interesting to see where the Packers end up as a unit after this draft. But Joe, any thoughts where we go from here?
The big thing is now that they've confirmed that they're going to go to a more of a 4-3 front, it's gonna. And I know there's guys out there like Brian Maffey and that say that these are the thresholds that they hold for their positional players. That's great, but now we're in a 4-3 front. Is that going to change anything on it? We kind of talked about this a little bit with Jake when we were doing the edge rushers, where guys that are looked at as first round edge rushers are more your 6'3", 250 more than the 6'3", 275 like a Lucas Van Ness or Rashawn Gary. So I know Gutekunst has said that They don't plan on changing what their edge guys' measurements are going to be, but that doesn't mean they're not going to change what the interior lineman measurements are going to be. And like I was talking with Mike a little bit before we started recording, a lot of the guys that are looked at as top defensive tackles in this draft don't measure out with those parameters that we've seen taken in the past. So are they going to reach on somebody? Are they going to take somebody that we know is a top level talent? Or what are they going to do with it? Are they going to budge from what they've gone with in the past? But with the guys on the roster, I think Colby Wooden is going to be more of your edge guy and rotate in with Van Ness and Gary. I still think Van Ness and Gary are going to be your main edge guys. I think I'm not quite sure what they do with Preston. I don't know if they put his hand in the dirt and send him out there on maybe more rundowns or pass downs, because he showed a little bit more in the run than he has in the pass rush. I mean, he's still good in the pass rush, but now that he's kind of on that slope where he's getting up there in age, and is his productivity going to keep going? So, he could be rotated in at edge. He could be, maybe they put him out there in one of the inside linebacker positions, whatever it is. But Brooks, Slayton, Clark, and then the lone guy that we saw from the practice squad return, Jonathan Ford, are definitely going to be pure interior linemen just because of what size they're at. So again, and I've said this before in the podcast, them going to 4-3 front has made things really interesting, because does it change how they view players anymore? Some people would say no, but I think that it's going to have to, because of the crop of players that are coming in from college.
No, totally agree. And the thing that you kind of wonder with a 4-3 is that, Green Bay didn't play a two-gapping 3-4, traditional two-gapping 3-4, but you do tend to want guys that are better anchors in that defense. Obviously, both Ted and Goody sort of bent that, definition to get guys who could penetrate. Kenny's really one of the few guys that either drafted who could really do both well. But more so, they kind of stuck. They still would get, your Mike Daniels, your Carl Brooks, your Colby Woodens, where they're guys that, they can hold up, but you don't want them getting run at, kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see who, like you said, who kind of steps to the forefront out of this class. Just kind of looking into the free agent pool. The free agent pool is kind of taking its hits already at this point. The only unsigned free agents are, okay, I guess technically Fletcher Cox is unsigned, but he's either playing in Philly or playing nowhere. The only other names that really pop are, like, if you go the vet route and you want like a Calais Campbell, who still has been pretty productive, but he's approaching 40 at this point.
Right.
And if they want another like bigger anchor type of nose tackle, Brian Monet, who's mostly been with the Seahawks, another former Wolverine, but that would be a route you could go in free agency, because I think in the draft they have sort of steered more towards guys who have pass rush ability. But it'll be interesting to see, because I do think they need one more run guy who can run stuff. You've got Slayton, who I thought took a massive leap in his game last year. Kenny, I think, will be more effective as a run defender in a 4-3 front, where he's not being expected to eat a double team and cover two gaps, where it's more like, I've got this gap and I can just, I don't want to like say he'll be Aaron Donald, but kind of do the Aaron Donald thing where it's like, I just get to kick ass in my gap and we'll kind of live with whatever else happens. It's easier to funnel in a 4-3. So it'll be interesting to see what they do from that side of it. But like you said, I'm not sure. I think they do need to get a body out of this draft class, but I'm not sure how pressing of a need they're going to see to it. And really where and when Goody takes a guy is going to sort of give us a signal of what they think of their defensive tackle room. But like you said, getting into this class, it's a kind of like you said, there's a lot of guys who athletically tested well, who should fit at least on the athletic side of the thresholds. They should fit what Green Bay wants, but due to one measurement or another, there's guys who maybe don't quite, pun intended, measure up. But Joe, who's a guy on your must-have list if you had it your way?
Well, there's out of the guys that I watched, which I didn't get to watch a lot of them because, again, kind of like I was telling Mike earlier, it was getting really hard to get.
It's been a bad all 22 years.
So I've got one, and I wasn't really oversold on a lot of them because, like I said earlier, there's not a lot of them that had the high res and met like certain thresholds with. But the ones that I looked at were only off of the thresholds by like maybe a couple pounds or whatever it is, a couple, like a half a second on some numbers or whatever. But the main one that I'm going to do this one here because not only is he a guy that I really liked watching, but he's got to be, when it comes to the all-time name drafts in the world, this guy takes it. And I'm going to really screw up the name because it's not, I said he's got to be a Wookiee or something with the type of name that he's got. It's Rook Aurora. That was horrible. Aurora. I'm telling you, that's Wookiee. That's not African. That's not native. That's not Samoan. That's Wookiee. Aurora. But anyway, he's a defensive tackle out of Clemson. Like I said, he's got good size, but I think Mafi sent me what usually the parameters that the Packers do, and they try to keep him around 300 to 315 pounds. Rook weighed in at like 291, so he's only off by like 9 pounds. And he looks like he's got the frame to where he could put more on if need be and not lose anything. He's got a high res. He looked like he had a good feel for the snap. He was quick off the snap. He did have a vicious punch. I did say that he's got a high motor, and the only issues I see that he's got good arm length and good arm usage, but he tends to short arm things, and that causes him to get caught, and then he struggles to disengage when he short arms. But other than that, I really like what I saw out of him. I'm not going to put like a round grade on him because I don't know. It could be second, it could be third, but whatever it is, it's going to happen. I think he'd be the perfect guy to kind of rotate in there. I do think his run stopping ability is there, but it was hard to see on film because I think they used him more as a pass rusher than they did as a run stopper. But really, I wouldn't be upset if they drafted him.
No, he's one of the guys that I had on my eye on. I kind of think that if they're going to add to the room, it's going to be someone who's more in that day two range, just because you want a guy who's going to come in and not necessarily take a roster spot from like Colby or something like that, but you want someone who's definitively going to have a tangible impact on this season, as opposed to someone that you're going to kind of, what they've done with Jonathan Ford, where he's just kind of languished on the practice squad for 2 seasons kind of thing. And that's not to say that you're looking for a definitive instant early impact, but someone that you're like, yeah, we're going to get, a couple hundred snaps out of this kid before the season's over kind of thing. So I think that's Rook is definitely a guy that I've kept my eye on. One of the ones that I had my eye on, and so I've got 2 that I'm going to go over. The second one is, honestly, he's a legit prospect for the Packers, but also it's what I've kind of done with the other position groups that I've been on where I've kind of recapped Michigan prospects. But the first one is Justin Ibogbe. Same thing. I'm just saying it with confidence. Ibogbe from Bama. And so same-ish measurements as Rook, where Ibogbe is a little taller. He's not that much taller, only a half-inch taller. Same in that kind of 295 to 300 range. Slightly shorter arms, but still over the 33-inch that they kind of would hope to push for. And he's more of that. He's a stouter run defender. He was probably the best run defender Bama had against Michigan when they played each other in the Rose Bowl. Michigan honestly had some success one-on-one against their other line of scrimmage defenders. And I thought that Ibogbe was the one who gave them some issues in that game when it came time to try and man up on him. So that's kind of that's sort of the body that I'm looking for out of this class, is someone who can defend the run and sort of improve the stoutness up the middle, because like we were kind of alluding to, really out of the tackles they have at this point, it's Clark and Slayton who are your trusted run defenders. Brooks, he's there to penetrate and create pass rush. Wooden is he can stymie a single block, but if he gets run at, he's going to get gashed. And then Wyatt has, he really improved his game as a pass rusher last year, needs to improve his ability to finish when he gets to the quarterback, but his run defense is still a problem at this point. He would flash a play here and there, but it really, it limited Green Bay's ability to play their base defense, because you're always kind of like, who's going to be that third D tackle when they need a run stop kind of thing. So I do think that's where it helps that they're in this 4-3 look where you only need two. And but it would be nice to get a third run defender. So Ibogbe is up there. And then the other guy is Chris Jenkins, where and if that last name rings a bell, he is Cullen Jenkins' nephew. His dad he's Chris Jenkins Jr. His dad was Chris Jenkins Sr., the massive nose tackle for the Panthers. Played in that Super Bowl against the Patriots back in 2002-2003 season. And I think Jenkins Sr. ended up on the Jets, I believe, under Rex Ryan. But so he is not the same guy. He does not have the same build that his dad did or does. Jenkins, I'm honestly kind of surprised he measured in at like 299, but everyone, I've had multiple people ask, like, what is he? We see his name get mocked. You see that he's on Bruce Feldman's freak athletic list going into the last two seasons. And the big thing with Jenkins, he's got long arms. He's strong as an ox, and he knows how to lock out his arms and just disengage in run defense. His pass rush, it's a little bit of a weird thing where, like, people are like, can he not pass rush? Is that why he didn't get as many snaps? And I don't think that's what it is. It's that Michigan had 5 defensive tackles that they could run out this past season. And even the year before, they had Mozzie Smith. So it's more a matter of they were thinking, we're just going to keep rotating guys to keep guys fresh. And so, Jenkins, in a more like, a more quote unquote traditional system where your best player gets all the snaps kind of thing, he probably would have twice as many pass rush snaps as he has had the past 2 years. But because of how Michigan operates on defense, they kept his snaps down so that he's fresher for the snaps that he's on the field. But you saw his ability to rip and pull. You saw his ability to just dip and go under offensive guards, and he has the upfield burst to just attack a gap, shoot a gap, and get into the backfield. But he's a guy that I wouldn't be surprised if he's Green Bay's pick at 41 or 58. Just because I do think he could be that kind of instant impact player. I think 25 would be a little rich, but it really is going to depend on how the board falls. But I just think that there's going to be guys at cornerback, safety, or edge that they would prioritize over him, and then you would try and get him in round 2. But he would be a great pickup for the Packers, kind of continue that lineage, that his uncle had when he was on the last Super Bowl roster. Similar player, could play on the edge on rundowns and then move inside, but very similar play style to how his uncle operated. So then I've gone from my homer description. Any thoughts on Logan Lee being a target for the Packers, Joe?
And I did do some watching of him. You know, he's another one that's got a high raz, and I think he surprises more people than not because he was kind of quiet overall this year. Where yeah, he had production, but it was it was not like Superman production. And I'm trying to pull up my numbers here real quick, but he does have a high raz. However, he he's just barely hitting some of the marks for it. So like his weight's at 281, but he's 6'5". Is he going to be more of the Lucas Van Ness type than an interior defensive lineman? I'm not sure. And of course, Iowa plays their guys all over the place. It doesn't matter how big you are. You're either going to be a line or an inside line. I can't talk. An interior down lineman, or you're going to be an edge rusher. And it doesn't matter which one it is. It's just going to happen on whatever play. So when you look at it, his weight is a little light for what the Packers tend to go with. Whoa. So his weight's a little bit light compared to what they like to go with. His 40-yard dash is kind of borderline. His splits are kind of not there so much. But overall, he's tall but light, stays nice and low, has a quick first step, gets a nice push, and he has a nice shoulder dip. I did question his strength a little bit because it was more he would, once he got engaged, it was stationary. Wasn't moving one way or the other, and the lineman moving one way or the other. He did have a good motor, and I said that he was not flashy, but he was definitely a hard worker. So, he'd be one of those that you would call a blue collar type player. So his arm length is just a little bit shy of the 33-inch mark. So I don't think he's going to be a high draft pick. It would really surprise me if he went before like round 3. Although the Raz might bump him up a little bit, but I'm not sure. But I'm not going to turn down another Hawkeye on the field. Let him and Van Ness cook.
And just from my point of view as a Michigan fan, I thought he was one of the guys that we had trouble with in that Big Ten championship game. I thought he was giving, Michigan had to shuffle their O-line because of the Zach Zinner injury the game before. But I thought that Logan had a pretty solid game. I know he had a sack and a couple other I think he had at least one more tackle for loss in that game. But you saw, like you said, you saw his athleticism play up. And I know his arms are a little shorter, but they're not they're not Dean Lowry short. So
Right.
it's it's in that area where it's kind of they might fudge it, in like you said, in a round 4, round 5 area kind of thing. So we'll see how they approach it, but I do think he's a guy that, if they don't get, like a Jenkins or Ibogbe or Ororo,
Yeah, see, it's not easy.
it's one of those where it's like, how many syllables are in his name?
It's a Wookiee name, and you've got to be able to speak Wookiee to be able to say the damn thing.
But yeah, if they don't get, a type like that earlier in the draft, I could see them go with, someone like Lee in, that early day 5 range where, I do think they've had some success finding defensive tackles. you've got, for as much as we bash Lowry, it was really more for the contract extension that he signed, not what he did leading up to that. So, I do think
it was kind of similar to the Preston Smith kind of trajectory where one year he'd look like he was unstoppable, and then the next year he would completely disappear, and then the next year he looked like he was good, and then it was just that up and down thing. But with Logan Lee, I could honestly seeing him be a Mike Daniels type pick. You take him in the 4th round, hoping you can do something with him, and maybe he does more than what you figured he was going to do.
Sorry, I'm being joined by my other kid, but I'm not going to put him on camera because he's in his bibs. But no, totally agree. And yeah, other than that, the only other guy that even caught my eye. So, some other names, like big names, there's like a Michael Hall Jr. from Ohio State. The hesitation I have with him is he's another like undersized one gap penetrator, and I don't know how many of those kind of guys Green Bay can have. And I'm not saying don't get good players, but my whole thing with that front is you gotta have more than Slayton and Clark to play the run, because especially if they're gonna, I know there's a lot of debate recently about what happens to Kenny after this season. There was even the thought, oh my God, are they gonna maybe move on from him before the season? You can't cut so many guys if you're trying to contend for a title. But there is honestly the question of, is Kenny staying past this season, or is he kind of is he nearing the end of his tenure? And so I bring that up to say, okay, that's one less guy potentially you have to rely on to stop the run moving forward. Slayton, will be.
Then, yeah, I was going to say, isn't he a free agent here pretty soon?
Yep, Slayton's a free agent after this season, so you've got to kind of reshuffle the deck. Whether it's you extend Slayton, you extend Kenny, but those things haven't happened yet. So that's why I kind of think that they do need to get another run defender out of this draft. So the one name that caught my eye from just a shits and giggles point of view is Jake Dorn from West Florida, just because for the sake of major league vibes, so that I can go, come on, Dorn.
And see, I thought the same thing about Michael Hall Jr. was, yeah, he's got a high motor and he's tremendous, but he got washed out a lot. And a savvy offensive lineman is going to be able to knock him off because he's using his speed, and they can just push him off balance, and he's got nothing to him. So I completely agree with that one. There was a couple, Gabe Hall that was kind of like Rook. I got the 2 Florida State kids that I think could be something else. Braden Fisk would probably be the guy that I would go early on, maybe not first round type, but easily a day 2, where he was relentless, quick off snap, disruptive, gets a little high. His momentum can cause him to get washed out, and then he kind of has a little bit shorter arms, kind of like we were just talking about with Logan Lee. And then the other one was Fabian Levitt, where he has the good size, the long arms, the good effort. He gets off the snap good. And this is another one, kind of like I think I said about Rook, where he's got the long arms, but he tends to, short arm everything. And that's when he gets caught up by the offensive lineman, as he shorts arms it. If he can extend out his arms and keep that offensive lineman away from him, he's going to be a better playmaker. And then the only other one I got is Leonard Taylor, and I really was not very keen on Leonard Taylor.
Yeah.
So, there's not much I want to talk about on him, but
yeah, the only one that I'll touch on too, just because the Texas finally made the playoff, and there was a lot made of their defensive tackle group. So they have Byron Murphy and blanking on
it's Ford.
Sweat.
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 Yeah.
Ford is the linebacker. But
Yeah.
so of the two, okay, both are kind of odd fits for the Packers for different reasons. If they picked one of them, I think they would pick Murphy over Sweat because they just, they just don't pick massive defensive tackles. They prefer guys with some amount of athleticism, and Slayton and two of the big guys, the two big guys who've made rosters, BJ Raji and TJ Slayton, they're guys that you can see their like ability to kind of play quick on their feet, even though their testing doesn't really show it. That's where Jonathan Ford was a weird pick because he is just like a heavy-footed guy who doesn't really move laterally well. But Sweat is huge, but he's not like what's his face? Jordan Davis from Georgia. He doesn't move like Jordan Davis does.
I know, and he doesn't. He did not test well, and he's got a big strike against him because he got picked up for DWI. So
yeah, and then the ding on Murphy is mainly his height. He's 6'1.5", and okay, so this is one of those where maybe the parameter is a little different because we keep banging that tree where it's like, is it different because we're in a 4-3? Is it different because we're in a 4-3? So in a 3-4, you want taller defensive tackles because, taller guys, you're able to, because you're two gapping more, you're able to you lock out your arms, keep the tackle at bay, and with the extra height, you can almost look around the offensive lineman that's blocking you. In a 4-3, because you're attacking that one gap, height isn't as big of an issue. It's more your technique, your ability to lock out your arms and stuff like, to hand fight, keep the offensive lineman from locking in on you. So Murphy has the athleticism. He has enough arm length. I think that they'd look at the things he does really well. He anchors well against the run, and he has that upfield rush ability. So of the two, I think Murphy would be in Green Bay's wheelhouse, but I think he'll probably get picked before they're willing to kind of, I don't want to say overlook because I don't know how they really feel about the height, but I feel like someone may take him end of round 1, early round 2 before Green Bay is willing to like look in his direction. So that's kind of where I think they'll stand on those two Texas guys. But
I was trying to look real quick because
yeah,
it looks like his stuff is very close to what Mike Daniels was.
Measurement wise, yeah.
Yeah.
And then Mike just didn't have any testing because he had the shoulder or whatever coming, because
he had a lot of injuries.
Yeah. I just remember he couldn't test coming out of the combine, but I remember like when we drafted him, I was like, well, I've seen that dude beat everyone up. So, and Murphy would be kind of that same thing where it's like, okay, yeah, like that's just, it's that whole adage of he's just a football player and not like, and he's not just getting by like with his guile and the seat of his pants. The dude has the requisite like tool bag and athleticism to be a great football player. And it's one of those where it's like, okay, does the fact that he's 6 foot instead of 6'3" matter that much? And we're not going to find out for a couple weeks. And it's one of those aspects of this draft that I'm really curious to see what happens, especially on the defensive side, because new scheme, not just new like coordinator, but just completely changing from that 3-4 back to a 4-3. So there's a lot of different aspects in terms of type of prospect they're potentially looking for. So it'll be really interesting to see what they do in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and just looking at it real quick, it has Murphy listed as 6'1.5", like you said. Daniels was 6 foot even.
Yeah.
Murphy is 297. Daniels was 291. Daniels was arm length was 32.5, and Murphy is at 32 3/8.
Yeah.
The only big difference in size is Mike Daniels' hand size was 9 5/8, and Murphy's is 11 inches.
Yeah. And okay, and so hand size is one of those where it's like, for linemen, how much does it matter? And it's your ability to like engage, and like when you've got that everyone's gonna say, "Aren't you saying they're holding?" No, it's all a part of the the battle in the trenches, and your ability to that rip pull move that Kenny utilizes. The bigger your hands are, the more you can sort of stun and control offensive lineman as you go to rip and throw him. So that's where that hand size comes into effect. So that is, like you said, definitely things that are in the plus side for Murphy in terms of his ability to be picked up by Green Bay. It's funny because the interior D line class is a lot like this edge class where there's a lot of guys who are good players, but they don't quite check all the thresholds that Green Bay has had in the past. So, is it a matter of we're just going to get a good player from this class, or is it, hey, because we're in this new scheme too, we're going back to a 4-3, is that going to also affect what they're looking for? So it'll be hard to tell which side of it is which. Good hasn't let on too much. He's kind of just mentioned that they're just looking for good football players. Don't expect them to totally throw out their thresholds, but they're first and foremost, they're looking for good football players. And if they believe in the player, they're gonna quote unquote bend their thresholds to pick them. So read into that as much as you want, but I think that Good is going to stick to who he is, but be open for new avenues because of what this class is on the interior D line.
Definitely. And like I've said from the beginning, this is why I like doing draft coverage stuff, because we know what we like and we can guess at what the front office is like. And then it's kind of like hitting the lottery when you actually get something correct, because it's not easy to be able to predict what a front office is going to do for a team. We can say what we think they're going to do for it, but it doesn't mean that that's what they're going to go with. And it's going to be something else to see this year, because there are certain holes that the Packers have to fill, and there's only a few guys out there that they can possibly draft that'll fill those holes.
Yeah. And like we said, and D tackle is one of the harder positions to prognosticate future success. Every now and then you'll have guys that are just like, yeah, that's a no-brainer kind of player. But for the most part, the projection at that position is tougher because how much of it is that guy, like Jarrell Worthy. I'll keep going back to that one. How much of it is a guy, the two pick, him and Mike Daniels in that draft class. Jarrell Worthy was picked because it's like, this guy is a great athlete. He has this, excellent jump off the ball, and we think we can coach him up on the finer points of playing the position. But we also picked Mike Daniels, who is just the technician of technicians, but also has some upside to his game, which we obviously saw he did. But Jarrell could never quite put it together, blew his knee out. And when he lost that step, it was like, okay, this guy isn't even an NFL player at this point. So it's really, that's where it's hard to project, because you're counting on your coaching to be able to unlock extra levels on these guys. But also you're kind of like, okay, how much of this dude's production is simply because he was just better than the guy across from him? And how much of it is like, okay, he's actually, a student of the game, knows his, he sheds blocks well and all that kind of stuff? Or is it, as much as you think like the game is being played in a phone booth on the interior, which it is, how much of it is he's just literally running around the guy that's in front of him, which is a lot of what a guy like Worthy. And, I call out Worthy because he's a guy that the Packers drafted, but there's a lot of guys like that who just never could figure it out at the NFL level. So that's where the hard part is in terms of, and we've seen it with Slayton. It took Slayton 3 years to become a trusted, solid contributor for the Packers, and hopefully his arrow continues to point up. So that's where we kind of sit, and it'll be really interesting to see where they, come really this time when this pod is released, where the Packers roster is at coming out of the draft in 2 weeks.
Definitely. And it's like I said, it's going to be something else I think this is the most excited I've been for a draft in a while, because it can go so many different ways, and we have no clue how it's going to, we have no clue about it. Whereas like last year we had an idea, okay, where they're possibly going to go an edge rusher. Or the year before, okay, well, at some point they're going to take this, and this. This year we have no clue how it's going to work.
I think especially because of how bad the safety class turned out to be, plus you added McKinney in free agency. It's we're hitting our end, but it's just kind of thrown into the question what direction are they going to go, because like you said, it's not as clear as like last year where it's like they're almost definitely taking the best tackle or the best edge rusher. You can debate amongst yourselves who that may be, but and it came down to Lucas Van Ness and Broderick Jones, and Green Bay was like, no, we're going with the edge guy. So we'll see where they go with it this year. I think it makes this class, fascinating in a sense. So, but that's something that we're gonna cover next week, because we'll be doing our final mocks ahead of the 2024 draft. Joe, anything else from you, or are we gonna carry us on out of here?
Well, it sounds like everybody over at your place is wanting us to cut out, so we better just wrap it up.
Yeah.
What do you think, little one? Wrap it up time?
Yeah. But we wanted to say thank you again for joining us for another draft preview episode of the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. Please give us a like and a subscribe on Twitter. Make sure, or a like and a follow on Twitter. Make sure to be entered into any of our drawings. You have to be following the podcast Twitter account at Ohana_Packers. Great if you're following me and Joe, but you will not be in the drawings. So you need to be there. Joe, I know you were kind of rummaging around. We're definitely doing the Jair one still at 523. When you have the further details, we'll definitely release them on the pod. Let you guys know what else is coming up. But otherwise, please give the podcast a follow on your favorite podcasting apps. Follow our website, ohanapackers.org. All of our blog posts, along with all the streams of every podcast episode, are up on the website. Like I said, like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcasting app. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, please 5-star ratings on any and every episode. And even if you're not enjoying what you're hearing, please give us commentary feedback, because we want to be putting out the content that you want to hear. That puts a wrap on this year's defensive tackle class. For Iowa Joe, I'm Mike Kawano, and we're going to wish you another Go Pack Go and aloha.